Hey, 8th grade. So today we're going to review Earth's processes, which is something that we talked about for the month leading up to this past benchmark that we took. So let's start with talking about the layers of the Earth. We have the crust, the mantle, the outer core, and the inner core. As you go deeper into the Earth, the pressure, the density, and the temperature all increase. The crust is composed of many plates, and there are two types of crust. There's oceanic and there's continental. And the oceanic tends to be a little bit more dense than the continental. There's also three different types of plate boundaries. One plate boundary that we talked about is divergent, another is convergent, and the last one is a transform boundary. The area of the Earth with the most tectonic action is called the Ring of Fire, and this goes around the Pacific Plate. So, what actually drives this plate movement with on the crust? The plates move due to convection currents in the Earth's mantle. So, within the mantle, we have these convection currents as the heat. The magma is heated due to outer core and then lifts up and goes back to the outside before it sinks back down as it cools. Now, as it does this, this tar like substance pulls the plates apart from each other as it rotates in either direction. So, the area where the plates are actually moving away from each other because of these convection currents is called the divergent boundary. And this is also what we call, when it's an oceanic plate, we call this seafloor spreading. So, what does this actually cause? It causes new crust to form as magma comes to the surface and cools, where the plates are pulling apart at that boundary, and it creates this trench or this ridge where the two plates are separated from each other. So as you see right here, we have, because of these convection currents, these two plates moving away from each other. Some of the magma comes up, it cools on the surface and creates this area in the middle of new crust. Another boundary we talked about is where two plates are coming together. And we called this a convergent boundary, convergent coming together. And there's two different types. There's oceanic to continental, where an oceanic plate meets a continental plate. In this case, the oceanic crust subducts beneath the continental because it's more dense than the continental. And volcanoes can form at this due to cracks in the continental crust and magma rising up from the mantle within those cracks. Another type that we can touched on was continental to continental crust convergence. And this is where mountain ranges are formed as the two plates collide with each other. So, as we see here, we above, this is an example of oceanic and continental crust coming together and meeting, where you have this subduction zone in both of these, and then through these cracks, this magma coming up, and this is creating those volcanoes. The last type of boundary we talked about was the transform boundary. And this is when two plates actually slip past each other. And this type of boundary can actually cause earthquakes to occur as the two plates build up pressure and slip past each other. So a transform boundary looks something like this, where you have this fault line down the middle as the two plates slide past one another. So convergent and divergent boundaries actually work together. So convection currents in the mantle push the plates apart at the divergent boundary. As new crust is added, the convergent boundaries are being pushed together. So you have these two boundaries actually being pushed together because of the new crust being added in the divergent area. Where the continental and the oceanic crust meet, the oceanic crust subducts below or slides underneath the continental crust into the mantle, and it melts back down, and that so that bit of crust then becomes magma again. Because of the subduction zone and the melting down, the Earth is not actually getting bigger, although new crust is being added all of the time. So, just to give you a better idea of what this entire thing looks like, we have these convection currents in the mantle due to this rising magma. It pulls these two plates apart where we have this divergent boundary at this ocean ridge. And then you see that as this new plate is being created, or this new crust, that this older crust that's further away, the oceanic, is going underneath the continental in this subduction zone right here. As it subducts, it can cause cracks in that continental crust, which is where this magma rises up and creates these volcanoes on the actual edge of the continental crust. Another thing I want you to notice about this picture is that it does include this transform fault or this earthquake fault as well, right here where the two areas were shifted. This whole process drives plate tectonics. So now that we've finished, I want you guys to go through these last few questions on the PowerPoint and tell me, what is the process that drives plate tectonics? Convection currents. What is a boundary where the two plates move apart from each other? A divergent boundary. The boundary where the plates slip past each other. A transform boundary. Boundary where subduction occurs. Convergent boundary. Boundary where volcanoes most likely form. Convergent boundary. This type of crust is more dense. Oceanic crust. The boundary where mountains form. Convergent boundary. The boundaries where earthquakes occur. Transform boundary. Hottest layer of the Earth. That's the inner core. This layer of the Earth is fluid in nature and has convection currents. The mantle. This layer of Earth is the coolest. The crust. The area of the Earth where the most tectonic activity occurs. The ring of fire. Go ahead and move on to your worksheet for today. You're going to be drawing out, just like you saw in the pictures, the convergent and divergent boundaries working together, as well as what's going on in the mantle underneath.